What if everything you touch, see, and feel around you was nothing more than a fleeting projection, a vibrant image sustained by something invisible? Imagine for a moment that the solid world, the one you swore was immutable, is nothing but a dance of frequencies, a shadow of the real. Physics, philosophy, and human experience itself already suggest that matter is not the foundation of existence, but merely a reflection of something deeper. This thought provokes an immediate unease. If the ground we walk on is not truly fixed, then what supports our steps? Facing this rupture, we open a dangerous and liberating door, the possibility that our reality may never have been physical. And understanding this is not an intellectual luxury, but an urgent call to transform the way we live, feel, and create our own story, the illusion of matter. The first belief we must dissolve is precisely the most deeply rooted one, the idea that the world is solid, tangible, unshakable. Since childhood, we have been conditioned to believe that what we can touch is the only proof of existence. The table on which we rest our hands, the stone we feel beneath our feet, the body we carry, all give us the sensation of density and stability. But that sensation is only a limited effect of the senses. Modern science, with instruments that pierce the barriers of perception, has already shown that what we call matter is, in essence, a play of empty spaces, fleeting particles, and vibrating fields that do not obey the logic of rigidity. What seems solid is, in truth, an invisible ocean of movement. Think for a moment of a city lit up at night. From afar, we see a continuous landscape of fixed lights, but as we approach, we realize that each light is a lamp. Each lamp is fed by a wire, and each wire pulses with invisible energy. The whole deceived us, creating the impression of a static mass. The same occurs with matter. It presents itself as a firm wall, but the deeper we dive into its structure, the more we discover that its solidity is nothing more than an optical illusion of consciousness. The atoms that make up our body and the universe are composed of more than 99% empty space. And yet we swear we are surrounded by stone walls, by dense bodies, by impenetrable barriers. This discovery carries within it an existential rupture. If matter is not what we think, if what we call real dissolves when observed deeply, then what remains as a foundation? The world to which we cling and on which we base our certainties is a theater of appearances sustained by an invisible stage. The mystical traditions of many cultures had already intuited this. Ancient texts spoke of life as a dream, as a painting made of colors that dissolve at the touch of rain. What contemporary science confirms is that there is no rigidity, only dance. There is no permanence, only flow. A metaphor may clarify this point. Imagine a stained glass window illuminated by the sun. Seen from inside a cathedral, you see solid figures, firm designs, defined contours. But if you step outside and look at the glass against the light, you see that what seemed compact is nothing more than the result of clarity passing through fragments. Matter is that stained glass, a play of light passing through the invisible, forming shapes we swear are real. Yet when we look beyond the surface, rigidity dissolves into transparency. This realization must not be merely intellectual, but lived in the body. Close your eyes and gently press the palm of one hand against the other. Feel the resistance, the firmness, the certainty that there is something solid between your fingers. Now imagine that beneath that sensation are billions of particles vibrating in silence, separated by spaces larger than you can conceive. Imagine that what you feel as a barrier is, in essence, a field of forces repelling each other, a magnetism that gives the impression of contact, but never becomes actual contact. This perception may unsettle, but it also liberates. The body you believe is stone is a river. The wall you think is a fortress is nothing but crystallized wind in motion. When the human being understands that solidity is only appearance, a new possibility of existence opens up. The limitations once believed unbreakable become malleable. The rigidity that sustained their fears dissolves. It is as if the prison were made of smoke bars, and all it takes is to walk through them with consciousness to perceive freedom. This is not just a philosophical reflection, but a practical key. Because if reality is less solid than we thought, then our problems, our pains, our fixed beliefs are also less definitive than they appear. In many spiritual traditions, this idea is described as the discovery that we live inside a living painting, a landscape that can be redrawn by the mind and by intention. The universe is not a block of stone, but a vibrating fabric. And if it is fabric, it can be embroidered. If it is flow, it can be redirected. Recognizing the illusion of matter is the first step to stop being a prisoner of the external world and begin acting as a co-creator of what manifests. Now imagine yourself walking in a forest. The trees seem firm, the ground feels hard, the sounds seem fixed, but in each trunk, in each leaf, in each stone, the invisible pulses, a dance that escapes the eyes. As you breathe deeply in this setting, realize that you are not walking upon something static, but upon a melody in motion. This is the revelation. The universe is music frozen into form, and we are both listeners and composers, foundations of quantum physics. As we enter the domain of quantum physics, we realize that the world ceases to obey the rules we learned in school. The everyday universe has accustomed us to think in terms of fixed, predictable objects, subject to the law of cause and effect, like the gears of a machine. Yet when scientists looked inside matter at microscopic scales, what they found was not a mechanism, but an ocean of possibilities. At this level, the world is not composed of rigid blocks, but of entities that behave in paradoxical ways, sometimes particle, sometimes wave, sometimes both at once. Heisenberg's so-called uncertainty principle shows us that it is impossible to determine both the position and the velocity of a particle with exactness at the same time. This means that the very foundation of matter is not in a fixed point, but in a state of indefinition. Reality, therefore, is not a stage with pieces already placed, but a symphony rearranged at every instant, depending on how it is observed. The famous double-slit experiment reinforces this strangeness. When electrons are fired at a barrier with two openings, they behave like waves, creating interference patterns. But when an observer tries to find out through which slit each electron passed, the pattern changes. The electrons act like particles. The conclusion is disturbing. The mere act of observing alters the outcome. This discovery shatters the notion that the universe is independent of us. Classical science taught that the world existed out there, indifferent to our presence. Quantum physics, however, suggests that consciousness actively participates in the formation of reality. Instead of being spectators of a finished film, we are co-authors of each scene that arises before us. This participation does not occur on a large scale, like lifting a mountain with our gaze, but on subtle, invisible scales that sustain the entire storyline of the physical world. A symbolic example may illustrate. Imagine a glass screen that changes color depending on who looks at it. Without a gaze, it remains translucent in suspension, but when observed, the screen colors itself blue, red, or green, depending on the attention it receives. Quantum reality behaves like this living screen. It awaits the contact of consciousness to manifest in defined form. This does not mean that we create everything out of nothing, but that we participate intimately in the process of choosing among the infinite possibilities available. Within this perspective, the concept of wave function collapse becomes fundamental. Particles, before being observed, are not in a single state, but in all possible states simultaneously. It is as if a card were face up and face down at the same time, and only when someone reveals it does one of the sides become reality. This unpredictability is not a flaw of the universe, but its very language. It communicates with us not through rigid certainties, but through open probabilities. Here arises a rupture that deeply shakes our conceptions of life. If everything is in a state of possibility until consciousness interacts, then reality is far less determined than we imagined. This opens space for the understanding that our intentions, thoughts, and perceptions are not merely reflections of the world, but forces that shape the world itself. To feel this in the body, do a small exercise. Close your eyes and choose an intense memory. It can be a memory of joy, pain, or achievement. Bring this memory to the surface and notice how your body responds. The heart speeds up, muscles change tension, breathing shifts. This scene is not happening now in the external world, but inside you it reorganizes your physical reality. It is a practical example of how consciousness is not just a mirror, but a creative field that alters material states. Likewise, at the quantum level, the presence of the observer reorganizes the universe. Quantum physics, as dry as it may seem in formulas and equations, is in fact a poetic invitation to rethink the nature of existence. It tells us that we are inside a cosmic game where the board is not fixed, but is redrawn with every gaze, with every intention. We are not just travelers on a predestined train, we are the ones helping to choose the tracks at each fork. And this revelation brings a new responsibility. If reality is not physical in its essence, but probabilistic, vibrational, and open to consciousness, then every thought we cultivate, every emotion we nurture, is silently participating in the architecture of the real. Quantum physics does not give us only theories, it returns us to the central role in the mystery of life, the role of consciousness. If quantum physics has already shown us that reality does not manifest independently, but responds to observation, the inevitable question is, what is the true function of consciousness in this story? For centuries, it was believed that the mind was only a secondary product of the brain, like the flame of a candle that goes out when the body dies. This reductionist view explained consciousness as a chemical effect, without any power over the physical world. However, modern experiments and the oldest traditions converge in a bold direction. Consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, but the matrix that organizes matter. When we come across the phenomenon of the observer influencing the outcome of quantum experiments, we are faced with a clear clue that consciousness not only records the world, but participates in its construction. We are not passive cameras, we are projectors. Just as the light of a projector brings to life images previously invisible on a screen, our consciousness illuminates potentials and transforms them into tangible reality. The physical world, in this sense, would not be the base but the projection. A metaphor can help expand this perception. Imagine a crystal-clear lake on a windless night. Its surface is calm, mirrored, almost invisible. Suddenly, a stone is thrown. Waves form, patterns spread, reflections multiply. Consciousness is like that stone. By entering the field of potential, it causes ripples that shape the scene. Without the stone, the lake would remain suspended, without a defined form. Likewise, without consciousness, physical reality would be nothing but a dormant possibility. Spiritual traditions, in different ways, have already spoken of this mystery. In certain Eastern currents, it is said that the mind is not inside the body, but the body is inside the mind. What we call I is not an isolated bubble, but an extension of a broader consciousness that experiences itself through us. If we accept this view, then the brain ceases to be the creator and becomes merely the translator, an antenna tuning in to the frequencies of universal consciousness. The experience of being alive would, in this case, be consciousness observing itself through countless points of view. This idea may seem abstract, but we can experience it. Close your eyes and bring to your attention the simple fact of being conscious. Do not think of an object, do not cling to a memory. Simply perceive the presence that perceives. This act of noticing your own consciousness reveals something subtle. You are not merely thoughts or emotions, but the space in which they arise. This space is untouched by external changes, like a sky that remains open while clouds pass by. Recognizing this is taking a step toward understanding that consciousness is the invisible stage on which life is projected. Science has been investigating this mystery in various ways. Experiments with collective intention, in which groups focus their minds on a specific goal, show statistically significant effects on the behavior of seemingly random systems. Although still controversial, these studies suggest that consciousness is not limited to the inside of the skull, but interacts with fields that permeate reality. If this is true, we are facing a revolution. What we think, feel, and project may influence structures beyond what we call the physical. This perspective should not be confused with the simplistic idea that we can control the universe with mere wishes. Consciousness is not a tool of manipulation, but a field of participation. It does not act alone. It responds in harmony with the greater flow of the cosmos. It is as if we were playing a harp. Our personal strings resonate in harmony with a broader music. Each note we emit influences the symphony, but the symphony also surrounds and guides us. An exercise can make this more concrete. Breathe deeply and feel the expansion of air in your lungs. Now, as you exhale, imagine that your breath does not end within the body, but mixes with the space around you. Visualize this expansion reaching the room, the street, the sky. Allow yourself to feel that consciousness is not limited to the skin, but extends like a silent wave. This simple gesture already changes the way your body responds, reducing tensions, expanding sensations. This shows that consciousness is not just an internal lens, but an expansive force that reorganizes the way we experience the world. The question that then arises is inevitable. If consciousness participates in the creation of reality, what are we actually creating throughout life? Each thought, each emotion, each belief functions as an invisible mold. External structures end up reflecting these molds, just as clay takes the shape of the hand that molds it. By realizing the role of consciousness, we become responsible for what we project. We can no longer see ourselves as passive victims of a blind world. We become conscious authors of a story that has always been alive within us. The role of consciousness, therefore, is not only to observe the real, but to reveal that the real does not exist separate from it. This revelation opens the door to understanding reality, not as a material prison, but as a malleable field where life reinvents itself at every moment. Vibration and the perception of the mind. If up to this point we have understood that matter is an illusion and that consciousness actively participates in the construction of reality, we now need to dive into an even subtler dimension: vibration. Everything that exists, from stars to the smallest atom, is not made of solid substance but of vibrational patterns. The universe is not a stone but a symphony in motion. When we speak of vibration, we are not referring only to audible sound or waves measurable by instruments, but to the fundamental principle that everything pulses, oscillates, breathes in invisible rhythms. The human mind is a sensitive receiver of these vibrations. What we call perception is not just the recording of external stimuli, but the translation the brain makes of vibrational waves into images, sounds, smells, sensations. The eye, for example, does not see objects, it captures light frequencies. The ear does not hear things, it translates oscillations of air. Touch does not feel solids, it perceives energetic resistances between atomic fields. The world we experience is ultimately a vibrational interpretation. A metaphor can illuminate this idea. Imagine an old radio, the kind you turn the dial to find a station. The air is full of invisible waves, each carrying music, voices, news. But until the radio tunes to a specific frequency, the space seems empty. In the same way, our mind is like a radio that interprets specific bands of the vibrational spectrum of the universe. What we call reality is only the station we are tuned to hear. But what if there are infinite other stations playing at the same time, beyond our usual perception? This thought opens a vast field. Many spiritual traditions describe invisible planes of existence, subtle layers of reality that coexist with the physical. Science, in its language, speaks of electromagnetic spectra beyond human vision, of waves that pass through our bodies without us being able to detect them with the naked eye. In both cases, the message is clear. What we call the world is only a vibrational cutout, not the whole. The mind, by expanding its perception, can access other states of vibration. This is what happens, for example, in vivid dreams, in experiences of deep meditation, or in moments of intense creativity. In these moments, we are not merely imagining, we are changing the frequency of reception of consciousness. The inner reality reorganizes itself and often also resonates in the external world. Anyone who has experienced a sudden intuition that later proved true knows there is something beyond ordinary perception. It is as if we had briefly tuned into a broader station, bringing information from an invisible field. This understanding can be felt practically. Try now closing your eyes and paying attention to the rhythm of your breathing. Notice that it is not static. There is an inhale, a pause, an exhale, another pause. Each cycle is a wave. Now expand this awareness. Feel the heartbeat, the flow of blood, the warmth spreading. Everything in you vibrates. If you stay in this state of attention for a few moments, you will begin to notice a subtle internal hum, a kind of silent music that has always been present. This sound is not external. It is the translation your mind gives to your own vital vibration. If the body is movement and the mind is frequency perception, then our emotions and thoughts also vibrate. Studies show that emotional states alter not only the body's chemistry, but also the energy field around it. When someone is consumed by anger, the environment feels heavy. When someone is at peace, everyone around feels relief. These everyday experiences remind us that we do not live in isolation, but in constant vibrational exchange. The mind is both receiver and transmitter. By understanding this, we realize that reality is not a frozen photograph, but a continuous dance of frequencies. The perception of the mind is the brush that paints this dance into comprehensible forms. Each person carries their own vibrational pattern, which functions as an energetic signature. This pattern is not fixed. It can be raised or lowered according to states of consciousness. When we expand perception, we tune our frequency to subtler layers of the universe. When we close ourselves in fear or rigidity, we tune into denser frequencies. A symbolic image can summarize this relationship. Think of a huge string instrument stretched across the cosmos. Each string vibrates at a specific intensity, creating different sounds. We are like small bows running along these strings. With each thought, emotion, or intention, we play a note that reverberates through the fabric of the real. The universe, therefore, is not an empty space, but an infinite harp in resonance. The recognition that everything vibrates transforms the way we live. We begin to understand that health is not just the absence of disease, but vibrational harmony. That relationships are not sustained only by words, but by the energetic tuning between those involved. That dreams and goals are not just mental projections, but frequency adjustments that attract compatible realities. The mind, in perceiving, does not merely interpret, it resonates. And in resonating, it creates. Thus, vibration and the perception of the mind reveal that the universe is less a collection of objects and more a living orchestra. We not only hear the music, we are musicians and instruments at the same time. With every conscious or unconscious note, we participate in the composition we call reality. Evidence beyond the physical. Up to this point, we have spoken of concepts, metaphors, and subjective experiences that lead us to the perception that reality is not merely physical. But there is something even more provocative. The concrete evidence gathered in scientific research and human experiences that points to dimensions beyond matter. The idea that everything is vibration, or that consciousness shapes the real, might seem like mere philosophy if there were no facts to support it. However, over the decades, records have accumulated that challenge the limits of materialism. Let's start with the phenomena of inexplicable healing. Modern medicine, despite its sophistication, encounters cases that escape its explanations. Spontaneous remissions of terminal illnesses, accelerated healing, and the effects of meditative practices on the body challenge the traditional paradigm. Studies on the so-called relaxation response reveal that states of deep consciousness can alter heart rate, reduce inflammation, balance hormones, and even modify genetic expression. We are not talking about magic, but about science documenting how the mind interacts with the body at invisible levels. Another intriguing field is near-death experiences. People whose vital signs have been interrupted report lucid perceptions, symbolic encounters, and the sensation of leaving the body. Most remarkable is that many of these descriptions include verifiable details: doctors being observed, dialogues accurately recounted, objects seen from impossible angles. The materialist explanation that these are merely hallucinations of a collapsing brain loses force when we remember that the brain was, in many cases, clinically inactive. If consciousness remains active without brain activity, where does it really reside? There is also research into telepathy and extrasensory perception. In controlled laboratories, volunteers have managed to transmit images, impressions, and even emotions to other distant people at rates higher than chance. Although controversial, these experiments reinforce the idea that the mind is not confined to the physical body, but connects to a broader field. Thus, thoughts and intentions could travel beyond the skin, resonating in shared spaces. The phenomenon of synchronicity described by Carl Jung also points to this expanded reality. They are not just coincidences, they are meaningful events that connect the internal and external as if they were part of the same fabric. You think of someone and that person calls. You dream of an image and the next day you find the same scene on the street. The boundary between subjective and objective dissolves, revealing that both emerge from the same invisible source. This evidence invites us to radically rethink who we are and what life is. If consciousness is not generated by the brain, but uses it as an instrument, then our existence is not limited to birth and death. If the mind influences the body, then health and disease are not just physical issues but vibrational states. If we can connect at a distance, then we are immersed in a unified field that transcends space and time. To feel this mystery practically, close your eyes and recall a moment when you knew something without logical explanation. Perhaps you felt you shouldn't take a certain path, and by avoiding it, later found out there had been an accident there. Perhaps you thought of someone you hadn't seen in years, and they reappeared. This silent knowing is not the product of reasoning, but of a perception that goes beyond the limits of the common mind. By recognizing this, you open yourself to the evidence that life operates on invisible layers, interconnecting everything in a living network. A symbol can express this idea. Think of a vast tapestry. From the back, we see only loose threads and disconnected knots. But when we turn the piece around, a harmonious design emerges that gives meaning to the apparent chaos. Our everyday vision is like looking at the reverse side of the tapestry. We see fragments and believe that is all there is. But from time to time, the fabric reveals itself and we realize there is a larger pattern, an intelligence operating beyond the physical. This evidence does not intend to convince us by imposition, but invites us to expand the investigation. It shows that reality is more vast than we suppose, that we are immersed in an invisible ocean where mind, body, and universe intertwine. What we call physical is only the surface of this immensity. And if you feel this theme resonates within you, I want to invite you to actively participate in this collective investigation. Like this video right now so that more people awaken to this truth. And in the comments, write the phrase, "I see beyond the physical." This simple declaration will be like a vibrational seal, marking your decision not to be content with appearances, but to explore the invisible layers of reality. The subconscious as creator. If consciousness has already shown itself to be an active field that shapes the real, there is an even more powerful layer that acts silently, the subconscious. It is there that deep patterns, hidden memories, entrenched beliefs, and forces reside that often determine our destiny without us even noticing. While the conscious mind is like the tip of an iceberg visible above the water, the subconscious is the immense submerged structure that supports and directs everything that manifests. Psychological science has already shown that more than 90% of our daily decisions are made without the intervention of the rational mind. Walking, driving, reacting to stimuli, choosing words, or even feeling emotions follow scripts we do not directly control. This immense reservoir of information forms a field that not only guides our actions, but also influences how external reality organizes itself around us. In other words, the subconscious is the invisible architect of our experience. A metaphor can illustrate this mystery. Imagine a great underground river running silently beneath the earth. On the surface, we see small streams, brooks, lakes. They seem independent, but they are all fed by this hidden river. So it is with the subconscious, a powerful current that, even though invisible, sustains and directs the visible landscape of our lives. When we ignore its existence, we believe the surface streams are autonomous. When we recognize the underground river, we understand that the true creative force lies below the surface. Spiritual traditions intuited this truth millennia ago. Keys such as prayer, meditation, and rituals of repetition were created not to convince the rational mind, but to penetrate the deeper layers of the subconscious. Repeating an affirmation, visualizing a scene, feeling an emotion intensely are not naive gestures. They are strategies to reprogram the hidden current that creates the real. Today, neuroscience confirms that repeated practices shape brain connections, alter chemical patterns, and reconfigure the way the body responds to the world. Think of a moment when you believed with your entire being that something would go wrong. Without realizing it, your body prepared for failure. Tense muscles, short breathing, constant distractions. The result often confirmed the belief. Now recall a situation in which you carried an unshakable conviction that you would succeed. Your body opened up, your energy attracted opportunities, people appeared along the way. This difference was not the result of chance, but of the subconscious programming that guided each invisible gesture. The subconscious also holds records that are not only individual. Studies in depth psychology suggest the existence of a collective unconscious, a shared field that carries universal symbols, archetypes, and patterns. That is why different cultures at different times created similar myths: the hero who descends into darkness, the miraculous birth, the cycle of death and rebirth. These images are not only in the stories, but in the very subconscious fabric of humanity. When we access this field, we connect not only to ourselves, but to a greater memory that surpasses us. A simple exercise can bring us closer to this dimension. Close your eyes and mentally repeat a short phrase such as, "I am whole" or "I trust life." Repeat in silence, feeling the words echo like drops falling into a deep lake. At first, it may seem like mere sound, but by persisting, you will notice that something in the body begins to respond. Perhaps a relaxation, perhaps an unexpected emotion. This is the subconscious receiving the seed, incorporating the new vibration. The constant repetition of this practice creates a new course in the underground river, and little by little the surface landscape transforms. The great challenge is that the subconscious does not distinguish truth from lie, imagination from reality. It responds to emotional intensity and repetition. That is why negative images fed by fear and trauma end up becoming powerful molds that attract similar situations. Likewise, positive images, sustained with clarity and emotion, can completely reorganize our trajectory. The subconscious is like fertile soil. It will give life both to the seed of wheat and to that of the weed, depending on what we plant. By recognizing this, we realize that we are not victims of random circumstances, but participants in a silent creation. If life seems to repeat the same problems, perhaps it is because the same beliefs are being reproduced underground. If life opens up to new possibilities, it is because new seeds have been cast into the subconscious field. External reality is only a delayed reflection of what already vibrates within us. The subconscious, therefore, is more than a repository of memories. It is the true creator of everyday reality. It translates beliefs into behaviors, behaviors into experiences, experiences into reinforced truths in a continuous cycle. By becoming aware of this process, we cease to be hostages to old programs and become lucid gardeners of our own destiny. And when we understand that this hidden architect does not work alone, but in harmony with the larger field of universal consciousness, we realize that our life is a constant dialogue between the visible and the invisible. Learning to converse with the subconscious is learning to converse with the universe itself, the invisible energy field. When we talk about reality, we tend to think of forms, objects, and tangible structures. But what sustains these forms is not the rigidity of matter, but an invisible field that permeates everything. This energy field is not a mystical abstraction. Today, science itself recognizes that we live immersed in oceans of electromagnetic, gravitational, and quantum frequencies that hold the universe together. And beyond what instruments can measure, age-old traditions have always intuited that there is a vital breath circulating through all beings, something that cannot be seen directly, but can be felt. If the subconscious is the silent architect of our experience, the invisible energy field is the ground on which this architect raises its constructions. It functions like a fabric that unites everything and everyone. Nothing exists in isolation. Each body, each thought, each emotion emits vibrations that spread through this shared space, influencing the whole. This field is like the atmosphere. We do not see it, but it envelops every gesture and every breath. a metaphor, can bring clarity. Imagine a large net stretched over the sea. Each point of the net moves when another is touched. Even if the impact occurs far away, the entire mesh responds. The energy field works the same way. What happens in one being reverberates in many others. That is why feelings like fear or joy can spread through groups without anyone saying a word. The shared field transmits signals that go beyond the physical. Recent studies have shown that the heart, for example, is not only a blood pump but also a powerful emitter of an electromagnetic field. This field can be measured meters away from the body and changes according to emotional states. When someone is in coherence, a state of calm and inner alignment, the field emitted by the heart becomes more orderly and, surprisingly, influences the field of the people around them. This reinforces the notion that we are not isolated within our skins, but in constant dialogue with the invisible space that surrounds us. In the East, this field is described as chi or prana, the vital energy that circulates through the meridians and nadis. In Western tradition, people speak of aura, fluid, or ether. In each language, the message is similar. There is an invisible medium that nourishes and connects life. Practices such as Tai Chi, yoga, Reiki, and meditation seek not only relaxation, but the balance of this field. When it organizes itself, health, mental clarity, and even human relationships are transformed. We can experience this reality in a simple way. Extend your hands in front of you, palms facing each other. Close your eyes and slowly bring your hands closer, without letting them touch. With attention, you will perceive a subtle resistance, a warmth or tingling in the space between them. This sensation is not an illusion. It is the body's energy field interacting. The longer you remain, the more tangible it will become. This exercise reminds us that we are not only flesh and bone, but also a vibratory presence expanded in space. The energy field also explains many phenomena that once seemed like mere coincidences. Have you ever entered an environment and immediately felt a heavy atmosphere, even without knowing anyone there? Or met someone whose mere presence brought relief and serenity? It was not just psychological perception. Your field was in direct interaction with the collective field. When many people share an intention or emotion, the invisible space is imbued, and all present are affected. This understanding brings a profound responsibility. If we constantly emit signals into the field, we are always contributing to the vibrational quality of the environment in which we live. Thoughts of despair or resentment feed chaotic patterns. Intentions of gratitude and clarity nourish harmonious patterns. This is not moralism, but subtle physics. The field returns to each individual what they help to sustain. A symbol can translate this mystery. Think of a vast, transparent lake. Each gesture, each word, each emotion is like a stone thrown into the water. The waves spread in circles, meeting other waves, interacting, amplifying or neutralizing one another. This movement creates patterns that are never limited to the point of origin. Likewise, what we emanate into the invisible field reverberates far beyond our own life. By perceiving the reality of this energetic mesh, we understand that we are not merely in the world, we are the world in vibration. There is no absolute inside and outside, but a continuous flow that passes through us and connects us. The invisible field is both the backdrop of existence and the active channel through which consciousness expresses itself. Recognizing and cultivating this field is learning to live in resonance. When we care for our emotions, thoughts, and intentions, we are not only transforming ourselves individually, we are tuning the invisible symphony that sustains the collective. This is perhaps one of the greatest keys to understanding why reality is not physical at its base. It is energetic, vibrational, and matter is only its slowest reflection. Spiritual implications. When we accept that reality is not physical in its essence, but a fabric of consciousness, vibration, and invisible energy, we are confronted with questions that go beyond science and directly touch the spiritual field. After all, if the world is only the densest face of something vaster, then each of us is not only body, but the expression of a greater consciousness that manifests temporarily in this form. This change of vision has profound implications, both in how we relate to life and in the way we understand our own existence. The first implication is the dissolution of separation. For centuries, we have been taught to believe that we are isolated individuals, living in an indifferent universe. But if the basis of reality is consciousness, there is no I separate from the whole, only different points of view of the same cosmic mind. Spirituality ceases to be mere belief and becomes realization. We are immersed in an ocean of unity, even when we feel fragmented. Each gesture, each thought, and each emotion reverberates not only in our personal life, but in the entire field of existence. This understanding also changes our relationship with death. If consciousness is not a product of the brain, but a prior and broader dimension, then physical death is not an end, but a transition. The spirituality of many cultures describes this process as the passage from one vibrational state to another. Just as water can transform into vapor without ceasing to be water, consciousness can free itself from the dense form without ceasing to exist. This view does not eliminate the pain of loss, but places it within a broader horizon, where each life is part of a continuous cycle of manifestation. Another implication is creative responsibility. If we participate in the construction of reality through consciousness, then each person becomes a co-creator of the world they inhabit. This is a powerful spiritual statement, for it removes the idea of a blind destiny and replaces it with the notion of vibrational choice. What we nurture within reflects outward, not as punishment or reward, but as natural coherence between the inner field and the universal field. Spirituality in this sense is not an escape from reality, but a conscious immersion into it. A symbol can help us visualize this idea. Imagine a great bonfire in the center of a village. Each person approaches it carrying their own wood. Some bring dry wood, which burns quickly and shines brightly. Others bring heavy logs, which take time to light but sustain the fire for a long time. Others arrive with green branches, which produce smoke and obscure vision. The fire is the same for everyone, but the way it manifests depends on each one's contribution. In the same way, the spiritual field of humanity is shaped by what we offer from within ourselves. Spirituality also teaches us to view suffering differently. If life is only matter, pain seems absurd and meaningless. But if life is the manifestation of a greater consciousness, pain can be understood as a process of expansion, as an invitation to awaken deeper layers of being. This does not mean romanticizing suffering, but realizing that even shadows are part of a broader movement of learning and integration. Spiritual reality does not eliminate challenges, it re-signifies them as passages on an evolutionary path. We can experience this spiritual dimension through simple practices. Close your eyes for a few moments and feel your breath as a bridge between the visible and the invisible. Inhale and realize that the air is not only oxygen, it is life. It is invisible energy circulating through you. Exhale and imagine you are offering your vibration back to the whole. In this simple gesture, you remember that there is no separation. You are not just breathing the world is breathing through you. This perception is spirituality lived, not explained. Spiritual implications also touch our view of time. If reality is not physical and rigid, then past, present, and future can be understood as expressions of the same consciousness unfolding. Many spiritual accounts speak of intuition as access to lines of the future, or of memories that do not belong only to this life. This is not fantasy, but a natural consequence of a universe organized in dimensions beyond linear chronology. Understanding reality from this perspective invites us to a new kind of humility. Not the passive humility of feeling small before the cosmos, but the vibrant humility of recognizing that we are part of something infinitely greater, and that our contribution, however simple it may seem, is essential to the symphony of the whole. This awareness dissolves the isolated ego and transforms it into a channel, into an expression of universal life that manifests through us. Thus, the spiritual implications of a non-physical reality lead us to live with more presence, responsibility, and reverence. We cease to seek spirituality only in temples or doctrines and begin to recognize it in every breath, in every relationship, in every moment. The universe ceases to be an indifferent stage and becomes a living field of consciousness, of which we are expression and co-creators. At each step of this journey, we realize that the world we call physical is only surface, a slow reflection of something far vaster, Reality is not stone nor limit, but consciousness in flow, vibrating in patterns that reveal themselves through us. What seemed solid dissolves into waves, what seemed an end transforms into passage, and what seemed separate recognizes itself as unity. This revelation does not close the mystery. On the contrary, it opens it even more within us. Because it is not about understanding with the mind, but about letting life resonate in its invisible depth. If you have come this far, write in the comments, "I walk beyond matter." Subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this, and continue exploring the invisible dimensions that sustain your own existence.